We're about to dive into one of history's most epic stories. It's a tale of a deeply divided world, a brilliant and, believe it or not, reluctant leader, and the forging of an empire that would completely change the course of the Crusades.
Okay, so picture this. It's the middle of the 12th century. The Crusader kingdoms, carved out by European knights, they look pretty much unbeatable. But the Muslim world they're facing, it's a total mess of rivalries, with no single leader to unite them. And this division looks like it's going to last forever until, one day, a tiny crack appears in the Crusaders' supposedly unbreakable wall.
The long, hard road to challenging the Crusaders for Jerusalem. It didn't start with some huge, glorious victory. No, it started with a single, shocking defeat for the Crusaders, an event that sent waves of hope and fear all across the region.
So let's set the stage real quick. In 1099, the First Crusade pulls off what everyone thought was impossible. They capture Jerusalem. By 1124, the Crusader states are at their absolute peak. But then, in 1144, something happens that changes everything. The Turkish ruler, a guy named Imad al-Din Zengid, captures Edessa. This wasn't just any city. It was the very first Crusader state ever founded. And just like that, it was wiped completely off the map. This was huge. It proved for the very first time that the Crusaders were not invincible.
Now, Zengid, he was a tough, ambitious, hard-drinking warrior, a real old-school brawler. But when he was suddenly assassinated, the mission passed to his son, Nur al-Din. And Nur al-Din was a completely different animal. He was deeply religious, he was humble, and he understood something his father never did, that real, lasting power doesn't just come from winning battles. It comes from winning hearts and minds.
And this quote just perfectly captures his whole strategy. See, Nur al-Din's full name was Nur al-Din Mahmud. So in this public prayer, he's literally calling himself a dog, totally unworthy of victory. The man was a master of propaganda. He created this whole image of himself as a humble servant of the faith. And you know what? It worked. He eventually united Muslim Syria, not with a bloody war, but by convincing the great city of Damascus to just open its gates and join him, peacefully.
Okay, so with Syria mostly united, everyone, and I mean everyone, turned their eyes to the ultimate prize. A land whose incredible wealth and strategic location could tip the balance of power for good. We're talking, of course, about the ancient and chaotic kingdom of Egypt.
Look, whoever controlled Egypt would control the entire region. It was populous, it was filthy rich, and it was ruled by the decaying, dysfunctional Fatimid dynasty. It was basically a massive power vacuum just waiting to be filled. And both Nur al-Din and the Crusader king, a man named Amalric, knew it. The race for Egypt was on.
Now, Nur al-Din's secret weapon for this job was his top general, a brilliant Kurdish commander named Shirkuh. And Shirkuh, in turn, insisted on bringing his nephew along. But that nephew, a young man named Salah al-Din, or as we know him, Saladin, wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. He literally had to be dragged along on this expedition completely against his will.
So the fight for Egypt was a mess. Seriously, it was this crazy web of alliances and betrayals. Shirkuh invades only to get double-crossed by the very guy he came to help, who then teams up with the Crusaders, but Shirkuh was a military genius. He was outnumbered, trapped, and he still managed to outsmart his enemies again and again, until finally, he marched right into Cairo and seized total control of Egypt for his master, Nur al-Din.
So, Nur al-Din had won. His general now controlled the richest prize in the entire Middle East. Game over, right? Well, not quite. History was about to throw a massive curveball that nobody saw coming.
Can you believe it? Just 2 months into his rule as Lord of Egypt, the great general Shirkuh, a man famous for his huge appetite, eats a massive meal and suddenly dies. This creates a huge power vacuum. His Syrian army is now leaderless, deep inside a foreign land, surrounded by people who would love to see them gone.
The Egyptian court had to pick a new chief minister, a vizier from Shirkuh's commanders, and they chose Saladin. So why him? Well, they thought he was the weakest choice, the youngest, the least experienced, the one they could most easily control. It turned out to be one of the greatest political miscalculations in all of history. The reluctant commander quickly and systematically outplayed every single one of his rivals, becoming the undisputed master of Egypt.
So Saladin is now the ruler of Egypt, but he's still technically working for Nur al-Din back in Syria. And, a tense rivalry was starting to build between the master and his star student. But fate was about to step in a way that no one could have possibly predicted. The year is 1174, and in a stunning, almost unbelievable coincidence, both of Saladin's main rivals die within weeks of each other. His master, Nur al-Din, dies from a throat infection in Damascus, and the Crusader king, al-Malik of Jerusalem, dies of dysentery. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. Suddenly, the two most powerful men in the region were gone, and the entire political map was wide open for the taking.
Saladin seized his moment. He marched his army all the way from Cairo, entered Damascus, and declared himself the ruler of both Egypt and Syria. Just like that, he had finally fulfilled his old master's dream of uniting the two lands. And with that single act, the Crusader kingdoms were now completely surrounded by a single, powerful, and unified state, led by one man.
For years, Saladin actually kept a fragile peace with the Crusader states. He was busy consolidating his own massive new empire. But that peace was about to be shattered by the reckless actions of one man, a Crusader lord who simply answered to no one.
This slide really lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you have Saladin, the unifier, the guy building treaties and trying to create stability. And on the other side, you have Reynaud de Chatillon. This guy was a chaos agent, a rogue lord who just kept breaking treaties, attacking peaceful trade caravans, even pilgrims. The Crusader king was too weak from leprosy to control him. Saladin's warnings were ignored, and a final, bloody showdown became absolutely inevitable. Saladin had had enough. He laid siege to the city of Tiberias, just knowing the Crusaders would have to respond. It was a brilliant trap. He lured their entire army across a sun-scorched, waterless plain in the middle of July. And just as the exhausted, dehydrated Crusaders finally caught sight of the fresh water of the Sea of Galilee, Saladin's army moved in and blocked their path. The battle that followed, the Battle of Hattin, was an absolute catastrophe for the Crusaders. Their army wasn't just defeated, it was annihilated.
After the battle, the captured Crusader king Guy was brought to Saladin's tent. Saladin, showing respect, offered him a cup of iced water, a traditional sign of hospitality and safety. King Guy took a drink, and then he passed the cup to Reynaud de Chatillon. Saladin immediately stepped in, making it crystal clear the king was his guest, but Reynaud, the man who had broken every oath, was not. Moments later, Saladin executed him with his own hands. It was a harsh, but very clear message.
With the Crusader army gone, nothing stood between Saladin and Jerusalem. The city surrendered pretty quickly. And this is where Saladin cemented his legacy. He remembered the horrifying massacre that happened when the first Crusaders took the city back in 1099. He chose a completely different path. Instead of slaughter, he offered mercy. The city's inhabitants were allowed to pay a ransom for their freedom, and those who couldn't afford it, thousands of them, were simply set free. He even paid for many of them out of his own pocket.
Saladin had done what no Muslim leader had managed in almost a century. He had retaken Jerusalem. And he had done it not with the brutality of those who came before him, but with a calculated act of mercy that stunned the world. The question now was, with the Holy City back in Muslim hands, how are the kings and knights of Europe going to respond to this new, unified, and powerful force?